What is up, my Shadowverse scholars, and welcome back to another Enverse Academy episode. So in today's episode, we're going to be talking about Haven. And usually what Haven does is it has lots of removal, all stuffs like that, and then it heals. Well, in set 3, Flame of Leviathan, there is a deck that comes out, a couple of cards, that's usually the Fable cards, that actually changes up the Haven build a lot. So let's figure out what in the world came out for Haven in set 3. Alright, so the deck that came out for set 3 Havencraft is Fable Haven or Egg Haven. So if you don't already know what that does, it's a deck where you play Humpty Dumpty, Alice in Wonderland, and 10 soldiers, and you do their effects, and you're able to either wipe their board or burn them straight to face for just burn damage, and it feels like a little bit of, a bit of Dragoncraft looking at that aspect of, burning your opponent's life and having just no interaction there, and it's just happening. So let's figure out what the pros and cons are for the deck, and let's figure out what this deck does. Alright, so the pros and cons for Fable Haven or Egg Haven to others is that it has solid burn, it's pretty good board clear, it's a pretty decent control deck, and it has a non-interactive win con. But on the other hand, it is lacking not reliable removal, and then it does have weird numbers in case you want to Alice and then look at the top 4 and then you could potentially miss. And then it has a hand discard where you literally have a card that literally has a text of, if you play this card, evo it, then, discard your entire hand and do this. So you really have to watch out for that. And then, a traditional Haven deck has really strong healing, or you expect Haven to heal a whole bunch. Well, this version of the deck lacks that healing. Alright, so let's go ahead and figure out what the win con of the deck is. And that is 10 soldiers. So for 3, when he comes into play, if this card was put onto the field from anywhere other than your hand, you put a Fable counter on it, and then you remove a Fable counter from this card, and you select the enemy leader or enemy follower in the field and deal it 2 damage. Pretty nice. So the first question you're probably asking is how we're going to put him into the EX area, which we will get into in the next one, but let's focus on the fact that this is your little win con. So what you really want to do is you play 10 soldier into your EX area, and then you put as many Fable counters as you can on them, just so you can shotgun your opponent for the rest of their life. Well, you're probably wondering to yourself, Sparta, how in the world can I get Fable counters on my 10 soldier? Well, here are all the cards that have Fable counters on them, and they come in the form of Actress Faria and Alice in Wonderland. Well, with Actress Faria, you can just engage her and then put a Fable counter on another Fable follower. And then with Alice, she has a whole bunch, and she has an ability of when she's played, she puts a Fable counter on herself, and then at any point in time, she can remove Fable counters and then put them on Fable followers in your EX or on the field. And then she has an extra ability of, on Evolve, when she's evolved, you look at the top 4 cards of your deck, and you may put up to 2 Fable cards from among them into your EX area, and you put the remaining cards on the bottom of your deck in any order. So this is one of the ways you can put 10 soldier into your EX area, so you can get that extra Fable counter and do more damage. And that's really what you want to go for, is you really want to use this Alice to set up your Fable counters, and then Actress Faria to, just keep moving them as much as you can onto the 10 soldier, and maybe even other followers that require Fable counters to do some extra things. But this is one of your main lines you want to do on your turn 3, so you can evolve if you go second, and then go ahead and look at the top 4 and get those Fable followers. Alright, and here are all the other Fable cards, and they come in the form of Princess Snow White, Odette White Swan, and Pinion Prince. And yes, I know Alice can get even more than just followers, she can get even amulets, and we'll get into that into the next one. But, looking at Princess Snow White, she's a pretty good solid 2-drop, she has Ward, and if this card is put onto the field, you put a Fable counter on it, and then we'll get into the rest of that ability. And then when she dies, if there's a Fable counter on her, you put her into your EX area, and then you can play her again, and you can't put another Fable counter on her because she's being played from your EX area, and you get that +1/+1, which is pretty nice. Then we have Odette White Swan, a pretty good solid 5-drop if you have some pretty decent wards in your deck, or just to heal as well. You have a 5-drop that can sit in your EX area at any point, and then you can play her, and then you give your leader +2 defense and each other follower on the field +2 defense, and then when she dies, you do it again, which is pretty nice. And then you have Pinion Prince. He's a pretty solid 5-drop, so when he's played, you select a Fable card in your cemetery and put it into your EX area, and then you may put a Fable counter on it. So let's say you end up milling, your 10 soldier or something. You can use your Pinion Prince to put him into the EX area, and he can already start off with a Fable counter. That's usually pretty good because the card you're going to choose is going to probably need a Fable counter to do some sort of thing. So here's some solid Fable support. So we have Alice's Adventure. When it's played, you search your deck for a Fable card, reveal it, and add it to your hand. Pretty solid on 2. You can just play it and then find any Fable card that you need. Then we have March Hare's Tea Time. It's a 4-drop. You look at the top 5 cards of your deck. You may put a Fable follower that costs 5 play points or less from among them onto your field, and then you put the remaining cards on the bottom of your deck in any order. Alright, and I put the Will to Overtake in here because it's a solid look at top 3. I mean, honestly, if you're going to be going for these March Hare Tea Times or your Alices, don't you want to know what's on the top of your deck so you can make sure you hit at least one thing? Because I say personally that I would prefer safety and security over suspension. Alright, so we talked about the Tin Soldier burn line. Now let's talk about Humpty Dumpty. Let's figure out why Humpty Dumpty had a great fall. So he came out with a pretty decent package. So there's the Explosion spell card that's a 3-drop. You deal X damage to each follower on the field and each enemy leader. X equals the number of cards named Explosion or Humpty Dumpty in your cemetery plus 1. So that's pretty nice. And then we have the Humpty Dumpty 3-drop. You know, he doesn't really do anything when he's played, but you can evolve him for free. And its evolve does some pretty great things. So on evolve, you deal 5 damage to each follower on the field, and then deal 3 damage to each enemy leader, and then you discard your hand. A pretty solid ability, if I'd say so myself. But, you know, minus the downside of you discarding your entire hand. But the reason why you discard your hand can also help with the explosion line if, you know, having those Humpty Dumptys in there. And then, you know, explosions that you might have drawn. But that's pretty good. But, you know, the reason you can do this in a pretty well way is that, you know, you use your Alice to put maybe an explosion from the top of your deck into your EX area. Or, you know, if you have a Pinion Prayer in your EX area, you can play him and then, you know, put the explosion from your cemetery into the EX area, and you can do that. Alright, so let's talk about the game plan for Fable Haven. So we already talked about the elephant in the room with the Tin Soldier and then accumulating all the Fable counters in the EX area and just coming out ready to shotgun you for the rest of your life. But on top of that, you do have to watch out for the Humpty Dumpty and see how many cards they have in their cemetery to see how many damage you're going to take from Humpty Dumpty explosion, and then plus that off of the Evo for Humpty Dumpty. So you're looking at 2 ways that they're going to be burning you for life, which is very scary. So what can I say in counter to that is to either swing face for very hard as best as you can, or, you know, if your deck is able to heal, try your best to, you know, heal back that damage that you received. Just a little tip that, you know, not just from Humpty Dumpty or Tin Soldier is Haven going to be burning you. If they want to, they can add the Majoro McQueen that came out in Uma, and you just put an amulet from your field into its owner's cemetery and you can deal 3 damage to your opponent, which they probably might use off of the Alice's Adventure, because after you play and find your Fable card, it really doesn't do anything else besides engaging it just to put it into the cemetery and give one of their followers a sale, which really doesn't matter too much. But that's really what they're going to do with their Majoro McQueen is, you know, put the Alice's Adventure into the cemetery and then burn you for 3 and go ahead and get started and start you at 17. Alright, so it wouldn't be much of a Havencraft deck or much of a control deck if it didn't have some sort of removal. It doesn't have the best removal, but it has some sort of removal. So we still have Blackened Scripture, you know, to just banish anything with defense 3 or less. Or we still have Aploid's Light, you know, that just banishes and also heals. And then we also got the new Pinion Prince, you know, you still play him for 5 and then you play that Fable card into your EX area. And then you can also evolve him to have a sail, and you can swing into those unengaged followers that are really pesky and just accumulating value by staying unengaged, like let's say Ancient Alchemist if you needed to, and move on there. Alright, so let's talk about the good matchups and the bad matchups for Fable Haven. So they come in the form of Isabelle, Special Weekend, Luna, that being Abyss aggro. So one thing that you have over Runecraft is that Runecraft is in a very hard spot right now. Like, Runecraft is very coping right now in terms of decks because, you know, they have either the spell chain route, which takes them time, and that's the thing that you need is time to really burn them for life. And Runecraft doesn't have very many strong healing routes unless they use the new Gingerbread House if they're running Earthright, or in terms of, you know, using Unicorn Dance or Unica, which forces them to leave the Unica unengaged a turn since you don't play cards like that, and then you have a chance to remove it. Alright, so I was having a hard time collecting some data for the Umacraft Fable Haven, but I believe that with Fable Haven you have the upper hand because your mid game is a whole lot better than Uma Crafts. Yes, they can go for the Silent Suzuka Storm plays and whatnot, but you know, you have terms of removal, you know, Blackened Scripture and stuff like that just to keep up. And then, you know, you have your Alice plays and you have a really solid just win con against Uma because Uma needs to swing into you to really get their damage through. And yeah, that's nice. Well, you're not playing the same game. You don't need to, you know, you have a follower and swing with it and make sure the spell card gets through. No, I play this follower, I'm removing Fable Counters, and that's it. Alright, last but not least, we have Abyss Aggro. So one thing about Abyss Aggro is it can always just high roll. It has the potential to just, you know, roll over you if it gets there. Because that's one of those decks where, hey, I had the nuts, so, you know, you just hold them. That's really what it is sometimes. But, you know, you're Havencraft, so you have to remember that you are a control deck, so you can definitely control their field by trading into their followers and still doing your game plan. And the other thing about Abysscraft is it is Abysscraft, so it has that cool skill called Sanguine, where they have to do damage to themselves to really get some bonuses. Well, you're jumping for joy because, you know, the lower health they're on, the better it is for you. Yeah, you might be taking damage in terms of follower, but when you need to shotgun, you don't have to shotgun as much because they're doing damage to themselves throughout the game. Alright, now let's look at the bad matchups for Fable Haven, and they come in the form of Dragoncraft, Swordcraft, and Forestcraft. Alright, so looking at Dragoncraft still has at least one Shenlong. Yes, it's not as consistent as it used to be, but you know, if they hit that Shenlong, then you're not having a good time because, you know, you still need to burn them, and you're not burning them throughout the course of the game. You know, you're really like whittling them down as best as you can get, and then you go for that Tin Soldier play. Well, Dragoncraft has a cool dragon called Shenlong, and they will heal 5, and that could really throw you off your numbers if it comes to be like that. Now, looking at Swordcraft, now this is a thing I've always wanted to say. There's the 2 decks, and then that's mid-tempo sword, and then that is the hero sword. So in terms of hero sword, this deck hits very hard, very fast, and you know, your numbers aren't really going to match very well because Blackened Scripture doesn't go off too well, because if they do the heroic entry and then they play the Mock Knight, he's going to be a 4/4, so you have to commit a whole bunch into just removing him, so it's not very fun for you. But the mid-tempo version of sword is still a problem too, because they have, you know, all these plays where they spam out the board, and then, you know, you don't really have Themis Decree unless, you know, you tech one in your deck, but that means you have to get rid of all your followers and you have to sacrifice them, which doesn't work out for you. So it hurts. So that's why Swordcraft is really up on you, because they spam out the board so well. And, you know, if you do your Humpty Dumpty play to, you know, spam the board with full 5 damage, you lost your hand that way. And okay, Swordcraft is like, alright, well, I lost my field, but, you know, every card that I play is going to cantrip me in some sort of way. Either that Maid Leader or, you know, the Gemstaff Commander. Any sort of way, they're just going to plus on any play. Alright, and moving on to Forestcraft, and I would like to say that Forestcraft is probably the worst matchup to go up against, because they just got a new card, and that being their version of Dragon Forte, which has Aura, and that's a control player's worst nightmare. And also the fact that they're going to be bouncing their own cards, and they're going to be healing while they're doing that, and you can't really get a good burn on them if they're constantly healing. So you're gonna have to try your best to go through with like followers and whatnot to whittle them down and then get them at a weird position, which really won't be too optimal because, you know, they're gonna be sitting better than you because they always have a ward, or they have something up that'll just bounce something back into their hand and then heal them. It's just an annoying process, and it's not a very good matchup for Havencraft. Alright, so we're finally getting to it, and if you know how we do this, we always give a grade to all these deck archetypes, or whatever you want to call them. And we usually go from a scale of either the top being S tier, A, B, C, you know, it goes down the list all the way down to D and F. So usually those decks are terrible, D and F, and then S being the best, and then, you know, anything between that is just like up in the air for like mid tier or, you know, locals. But we're going to go ahead and give Fable Haven a S tier because it's so good. So you have a non-interactive win con by burning your opponent. You whittle down, make sure you ward up, and like, it's pretty good. It doesn't have the best defense and, you know, lacking that removal, but the fact that it has that non-interactive win con of burning face is pretty solid. Alright, before we close out, I wanted to give a huge shout out to Shinto Senpai for, you know, providing the sample deck list for what did well in JP for the Fable Haven, because, you know, they're already ahead in sets of us. But this is what a sample deck list looks like. And it's pretty solid because it has the trail of light that when you go for that Humpty Dumpty play, you're not sitting there twiddling your thumbs looking at your opponent senseless. You can at least draw some cards just so you can dump your hand and then, you know, do that damage to the field and to their face, draw some cards, get that recursion going on, and then, you know, keep moving forward. I see also they're rocking Rapunzel just for that extra defense. Rapunzel is actually a pretty good card just for the fact that she has ward, and, you know, when she gets a Fable counter, she can attack and then keep that ward up. Alright guys, thank you so much for watching the video. You don't know how much I appreciate and love you. I just want to say, make sure to like, comment, and subscribe, and come join us in our Sunday locals. We should be having them this weekend. I'd love to see you guys, and I'd love to see you participate in set 3. Alright guys, make sure you're safe in whatever you do tonight, and safe whatever you do for the rest of the year. I will see you guys in the next one. Bye.
I gave you all my love, baby, my heart is cold when you're around. You warm it up, liquid gold, baby, yeah, you warm it up, liquid gold, baby, and my affection, all that paper you wasted. Take my love.